Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for this Week 2 edition of Inside the Zone. Justin Kinney from Ops joining us as always. And Justin, Week 1, everybody excited that won a game. Everybody that lost a game can kind of say, well, it was the weather.
It was the weather, yeah.
Everybody that went out and covered a game is still drying out.
We're still toweling off, right?
So my question is, did Week 1, do we learn anything in Week 1? Because the weather impacted so much of the action on Friday night, more so than we've seen in a long time in a week. Do we learn anything, or is Week 2 going to be kind of like Week 1 where we get more of a first impression, if you will?
A little bit of both. I think we can learn some things. We can take some things out of certain games, but we have to be wary of what we take out. So, Wayne, are they better than being shut out last Friday night? Probably. Woodland, are they better than being shut out by Leo? Probably. But I think we can look at Woodland and say they're not as good as they were last year or the year before. I think that's safe to say. Wayne, probably still not at the level of a Bishop Dwenger or a Snider or a Homestead. So I think these scores can be a little misleading, but I think we can take some generalities out of Week 1, but we'll definitely learn more Week 2.
All right, one of the big games in Week 1 is going to be our Highlight Zone game of the week. You got Homestead and Concordia. The Cadets, a couple years removed from a state title. Homestead was 8-2 last year. Both of those losses to Snider, once in the regular season at Lucas Oil and then once in the postseason. Both of these teams scored 40-plus points on Friday night. So how do you see this one shaping up?
A lot of points if it stays dry. I think Homestead, we debated so much in the preseason who's going to be the quarterback. Is it going to be Luke Goody? Is it going to be Jake Archibald? We saw both of them last Friday, and both of them are prototypical Homestead quarterbacks. They can hit receivers in stride with their timing routes and pick up chunks of yardage. So regardless of who they end up going with long term at that position, I think Homestead's going to be fine. And then Concordia, we talked so much about Kamari Anderson-Drew and really showed up again last Friday. And then his brother Amir really comes to play at the running back position. So all of a sudden, we were wondering who's going to be the running back, the bell cow for Concordia. Amir Drew, younger brother of Kamari, looked pretty darn good last week.
Yeah, we were kind of wondering. Marcus Morrow was a 1,000-yard back, and you knew Jake Bird was going to be back at quarterback and healthy after that thumb injury, ended his junior season early. They look good, the combination of Bird to Drew, but it was Amir Drew that really, over 100 yards, he looked good on the ground.
Yeah, looked very good. And it's just another weapon for Concordia. And we talked so much about Jake Bird and Kamari Anderson-Drew. We knew they were going to be able to run the ball to some effectiveness. But when you throw a talent like Amir Drew out there, make a guy miss, can really run in the open field and accelerate pretty quickly, that's what you need in this league, in the SAC, those difference-making running backs. Looks like Concordia has one.
We always talk about Concordia's offense, but their defense, I know Southside is probably going to finish, if you projected it right now, in the bottom half of the SAC, but still a shutout against an SAC opponent. What is going to be the key to corralling a Homestead offense that has a lot more firepower, and then vice versa? Homestead did give up some points to Northrop last week. How is the defense going to play into this game?
I think it's avoiding those chunk plays. I think that goes for both defenses. We saw Homestead able to carve up the Northrop defense big chunks. There were some times where Northrop defense looked good, and then they'd give up a chunk play. Same with that Homestead defense against the Concordia offense. Concordia has the difference makers, the playmakers, to pick up big yardage on a single play. So I think that's what this game is going to come down to, is those defenses limiting what those offenses are able to pick up big yardage at a time.
Elsewhere in the SAC, we've got Snider at Carroll. I was at Spooler Stadium for last week's Snider opener against Northside. I don't know how much we learned about Snider. They had to replace a lot of guys, but by the start of the second quarter, it was coming down in sheets. There were like 5 fumbles in the second quarter. It was just like one team fumbled, the other team fumbled. Yeah. I don't know how much we learned about them. It was a 31-8 to win against Northside. And then Carroll, obviously, with a 1-point loss in probably the best game of the week on paper against Bishop Luers. How do you see this one playing out? Because I still think we don't know exactly what we've got from both of these two teams yet.
Yeah, we expected Snider to need a couple weeks to get going, right? And the deluge they had to play in last Friday really didn't help all those guys in new positions. So we saw Michael Lito Jr. have a big game, a couple touchdown receptions. Quarterback position still kind of trying to figure that out. Is it going to be Barnes? Is it going to be Wilson? Who are they going to go with long term?
Deuce Taylor's in there?
Yeah, for sure. So you would think Kurt Tippmann and company want to settle on somebody at some point at that quarterback position. So a lot of people looked at that 31-8 score for Snider and said, is Snider not as good? Is Northside better? I think that's one of the games where we really can't take too much out of because of the weather.
Yeah, the second quarter was an absolute, like you said, deluge, and then the field I'm not knocking on Spooler Stadium, but it had rained so much in just a short amount of time, and it had rained before that I didn't get a chance to see the second half. But I can't imagine the footing was as sure as you would like it on a Friday night.
The drainage at Spooler Stadium is worse than my backyard, and my backyard quickly gets underwater every time it rains.
Yikes!
So
Justin Kenny coming with heat.
The crown of Spooler Stadium on the field is non-existent.
We could do a whole show on who needs turf. You could say Spooler and Zollner would be 1-2 in
1 and 1A,
whichever
1
order.
and 1B for sure.
Bishop Dwenger is at Northside. Obviously, Dwenger will be heavily favored going in there, and a great win for Jason Garrett in week 1, because when you play in conditions like you did on Friday night, discipline is key, and they were kind of the same old Dwenger in that they weren't going to beat themselves. That's, I guess, the one thing you can take out of that game, specifically when it comes to the conditions.
When you play in a game like that against Dwenger, it's almost like they have the advantage before you even hit the field, because they're so disciplined and they're ready to play in those type of conditions. I think they know going onto the field against teams that don't handle the weather as well, that's an advantage for Dwenger, just the way they play. And it's almost an intimidation thing, is we can play in the rain and you can't. And I think we saw that last Friday, is we saw Wayne affected by the weather.
Sure, it negated the speed and athleticism of guys like Craig Young and Devin Kelso.
And definitely Bishop Dwenger was affected too by the weather, no doubt. It's just the style of play, the physicality, the discipline that they have allows them to play more in control in that kind of weather than other teams.
I would love to see that game played later in the season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in dry conditions, and maybe we get it because last year it was a week 1 game and then they played in the sectional championship game. Maybe we get that again this year. I think that would be really interesting to see at the end of the season, or just really in dry conditions, how that game plays out.
Yeah, and it just seemed like a chore every time Wayne tried to pass the ball. It was just difficult because of the wetness of the field, the wetness of the ball. It just seemed like too much trouble than what it was worth on Friday.
But a big check mark on Jason Garrett's resume for game 1. I mean, he's got that taken care of. So
yeah,
good number
off to
1.
a good start.
Yes. Luers at Wayne. This is going to be a good one this week, I would think. One of the better matchups on paper. Luers comes out, and Justin Gaston with a big touchdown in the fourth quarter, and the PAT to win by 1, 21-20 over Carroll. And then obviously, hopefully we'll see Wayne on a much drier turf this coming Friday night. How do you see this one playing out?
We talked about it last week, is when Luers is able to catch these bigger teams early in the year. We saw it against Carroll last year. Carroll last Friday is before the wear and tear of the SAC sets in, attrition, injuries. Luers can match up with anybody in the city, 11 versus 11. It's when you get deeper into the season and lose some guys to injury, and the wear and tear of the SAC is when you see Luers struggle.
Especially on the line, offensive and defensive line.
Absolutely. So we saw Luers relatively healthy last Friday. They could match up with a Carroll. And now all of a sudden you look at a Wayne team that is staring 0-2 in the face if they do not win this Friday. So still early to say this team's out of the race, but you don't want to start the year off 0-2. Huge game for Wayne.
Southside at Northrop. This is a chance if you're Southside. Northrop put up 28 points last week against Homestead, but if you're Southside, this is a game you got to circle as a very winnable game.
Yeah, I thought Northrop got off to a good start last week against Homestead, particularly defensively, but then Homestead was able to string some drives together, score some points. So, you know, it's typical Northrop team. They can compete for a quarter or a half against most teams in the SAC. It's just when things start getting away from them, things start rolling a little bit for the other team is when they fade. So it's a very winnable game for Northrop.
Outside of the SAC, if there was a game of the week in a different conference, it would be Leo at Angola. Angola coming off a great season. They beat DeKalb last week to start things off on the turf up at Trine. And then Leo pitching a shutout 6-0 against Woodland. How do you see this one playing out? Because, again, we can kind of throw out last week, especially in that Woodland-Leo game, I think, because Woodland scores a touchdown in the first half, and that's the only scoring of the game. You would think historically, with Woodland's offense and Leo's offense, that would be a shootout, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and I think credit to Woodland's defense. I think, we're talking so much
Sebastian
about them being
Spieth and those guys can play.
Yeah, to limit Leo, even in those conditions, to 6 points, very impressive. But you look at Angola, put up a lot of points against DeKalb last week, so we know Angola is still going to be good, but graduating so many guys from last year, are they a threat to go undefeated like they were last year in the regular season? So this is where we find that out. I think Angola, where are they at? Leo also, where are they at? 2 tough non-conference games for the Lions to start off the year.
Chase Schnempf had over 1,000 yards last year. We talked about Roddy. We talked about the receivers a lot last year, but he really added balance to the offense. Looks like with a new quarterback, they're going to be, and maybe it was condition related, but going on the ground a little bit more. How do you see, Angola trying to kind of keep up? It had been 25 years since they won a sectional. Can they keep up, and will they have to do it a little bit differently this year as opposed to the way they were successful last season, based on personnel?
Yeah, definitely. When you lose a guy like Chase and just the way he was able to beat you in a variety of ways, whether it was with his legs, whether it was with his arm, I think you have to change some things. But Andy Thomas is one of the best coaches around in being able to do that and adjust to your personnel. So Angola may win games differently than they did last year, but I still think they're going to win a fair amount of football games.
East Noble at Warsaw, that's an interesting game to me. Bart Curtis, a Hall of Famer, he comes to Warsaw his first game. They win a shootout, 10-8 at Columbia City. All those 10 points came in the first half, but the defense held strong. And then East Noble was, I think, the biggest question mark in the Northeast State, because no more Andrew McCormick. Bailey Parker comes in, and I called him Blake on Friday. I apologize for that. But Bailey Parker coming in and doing a nice job, and they get a good win in week 1 over a Plymouth team that knocked them off last year.
Yeah, beat them last year. Of course, they got revenge in the playoffs against Plymouth, but good win for East Noble. You look at that score and say, man, is that offense going to struggle? But that's where we have to factor in the weather and the conditions last Friday. I think you're going to see that offense put up a little bit more points this week against Warsaw.
Garrett at DeKalb. Garrett comes out and gets a win, 19-0. Craig Smith, a big touchdown catch. That's always a county rivalry game. How do you see that one playing out? Because those are programs and kids that really know each other.
Yeah, and Garrett only putting up 19 points last week, kind of surprising against Heights, but then you go back, how much do you factor in the rain that we saw? So this is where you get into, man, we still need to learn a little bit more, because Garrett, very young, Garrett team this year under Coach Chris Depew. So is this team ready to compete in the NECC? I think we'll get a little bit better idea than we did last week.
The one thing that impressed me, in just looking at the stats, the Follett kid, the quarterback for Garrett, threw for I think it was 234 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a 54-yard touchdown to Craig Smith, which is a big chunk play. But still, in those conditions, and I know Prairie Heights historically hasn't been all that good on defense, but that's still an impressive effort, almost 250 yards on a night that was like Friday night.
Yeah, may have been the leading passer in the area.
He would have been up
close.
there.
Yeah, for sure. So, and a Garrett guy throws for 230 plus. That really opens.
Chris Defe's throwing out the old playbook.
They come out 5 wide on Friday.
Going to the air. Columbia City is at Whitco. That's an Eel River rivalry game. But Eastside at Adams Central, when you talk about some of the smaller schools in our area, that's a game that looks really good on paper. Adams Central comes out, puts a whooping on Belmont.
Yeah.
And then Eastside just continued to score at will in their season opener. Two teams that have really kind of come into their own in the last 4 or 5 seasons.
When you look at Adams Central, and yeah, they did beat Woodland last year, of course, but everybody believed, Woodland was head and shoulders above everybody in the ACAC. Is it Adams Central? Is everybody looking up at Adams Central? I think this is another week where you'll see just what the Flying Jets are. Of course, Logan Macklin, one of the best two-way guys in the entire area. So is it the Flying Jets league as it was Woodland's league the last couple of years?
What are you most looking forward to about week 2 overall?
We started off at the beginning talking about getting clarity, and I think that's where we stand. We're so eager to see the season start that we want to make snap judgments about everybody once we see actual football played in anger like we did last Friday. But the way the conditions were, we need to temper our thoughts a little bit and find out a little bit more this week about some of the teams in the area.
Was there one team that you saw last week when you looked at the stats or highlights or just anything that you said, you know what, this team, maybe we've already underestimated them? I know it's a small sample size and Friday might not be indicative of how things are going to play, but was there one team that really impressed you out there on Friday?
It's difficult because, I think Bishop Luers looked very good. I was very impressed with what the Luers was able to do on both sides of the ball. But if they could stay healthy, if they can put out those guys each and every week throughout the season, they have a shot against everybody. So really impressed with what Bishop Luers did. Really impressed with what Concordia did, because they have reached that point where they're now sustainable at the level of football that they're playing. We've seen Northside be there for a year, then fade. We saw Wayne be there for a year and fade. Concordia got there and has stayed there for now 3 seasons. So very impressive what Tim Manigal's been able to do.
All right. What game are you most looking forward to this week?
Biggest one I'm looking forward to is probably that Carroll and Carroll and Snider. I think Carroll needs to bounce back, and then the Wayne game as well.
All right, should be good stuff. We'll have it covered for you Monday here on Inside the Zone. For Justin, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next week.